Hello and welcome to the Adventures of George Washington. I am your host, Professor Worthington. In our previous two episodes, we delved into two fascinating books from George Washington's library, Richard Baker's A Chronicle of the Kings of England and Tobias Smollett's continuation of The Complete History of England. Our focus was on the tumultuous period in English history known as the Wars of the Roses. This week, we will conclude the captivating tale of the Wars of the Roses. As we journey through the story, let's keep in mind the valuable lessons George Washington might have gleaned from reading Baker and Smollett's narratives. The year is 1463. Through military action and political skill, King Edward IV, from the House of York, has taken the English throne from King Henry VI from the House of Lancaster, who is now being held prisoner in the Tower of London. Within 2 years of gaining power, King Edward brought stability to Britain and began to search for a wife. He agreed to marry Bona of Savoy, the sister of the Queen of France, but while his closest advisor, the Earl of Warwick, was in France arranging the marriage, Edward secretly married Elizabeth Grey, the widow of a knight slain in service to the House of Lancaster. Edward waited until the coronation of Elizabeth to reveal their marriage. This bold move not only insulted the French royal family, but also embarrassed his advisors, especially Warwick, and outraged the common people of England, who believed that his marriage to a woman of such minor nobility was a humiliation to the prestige of Britain. Despite the general disapproval, there was very little threat to Edward's reign until 1469, when the Earl of Warwick sensed the pulse of the English nation and seized the opportunity to incite an insurrection in Yorkshire. The insurrection was led by a man named Robin of Riddesdale, who, along with his men, captured and beheaded Queen Elizabeth's father and brother. Although Robin was also killed in the fighting, the insurgents continued their rebellion. During this tumultuous time, the king's brother Clarence formed an alliance with Warwick by marrying his eldest daughter, Isabel. Sensing the growing unrest in England, Margaret, the wife of the imprisoned former King Henry VI, and her son Edward of Westminster, who was now a teenager, amassed an army in France and prepared to sail for England to reclaim the throne for Henry. Perhaps as a means to repay the insult King Edward IV had inflicted upon his sister-in-law, King Louis XI of France facilitated an alliance between Margaret and Warwick. They agreed to solidify their alliance through the marriage of Margaret's son, Edward, to Warwick's younger daughter, Anne. In late 1470, the combined forces of Margaret and Warwick landed in England and defeated the armies of King Edward IV. On October 3, 1470, King Henry VI was restored to the throne, and Edward took refuge in Belgium. It was also agreed that should Henry or his heirs be unable to rule, the crown would pass to Clarence and his descendants. Ancient animosities between the Lancasters and Yorks made it difficult for members of both houses to work together in King Henry's administration. Feeling like an outcast, Clarence renewed his allegiance to his brother Edward, the previous king, and started clandestine efforts to reinstate him to the throne. In April of 1471, forces loyal to Edward IV attacked Lancastrian forces, killing Warwick and capturing Henry VI and Margaret. Early in May, these forces killed Edward of Westminster, the teenage son of Henry and Margaret. By the end of May, Henry was found dead at the age of 49 in his prison cell. Whether his death was by natural causes or murder is unknown. Edward IV returned to the throne and Margaret returned to France. For a while, Clarence served in Edward's administration, but tensions between the two brothers once again arose. Clarence was convicted of treason and executed on February 18, 1478. Margaret remained in France until her death at the age of 52 in 1482. For the rest of his reign, Edward ruled in relative peace until his death of illness at the age of 40 in April of 1483. This would have also been the same year that George Washington's ancestor, Robert Washington, the knight loyal to the Lancasters, died. With the death of Edward IV, his 12-year-old son, Edward V, was due to inherit the throne. Another of Edward IV's brothers, Richard the Duke of Gloucester, was appointed Lord Protector until the younger Edward reached the legal age. Rather than waiting for Edward to become king, Richard conspired with a group of dishonest noblemen who were completely without principle to spread rumors that the children of Edward IV were ineligible to inherit the throne because the marriage between Edward IV and the widow Elizabeth Grey was illegitimate. He also spread similar rumors about the children of his deceased brother Clarence, and even went so far as to claim that neither Edward IV nor Clarence were the legitimate offspring of Richard the Duke of York. Richard the Duke of Gloucester thus reasoned that he was the only legitimate heir to the throne. The noblemen who expected to benefit from the reign of Richard supported his claims, while the common people of England believed what they were told by their leaders. Thus, Edward V was forbidden to take the crown, and the Duke of Gloucester was coronated King Richard III on July 6, 1483. One of his first actions was to lock Edward V and his 10-year-old brother Richard of Shrewsbury in the Tower of London, after which they were never seen again. In his book, Smollett speculated that perhaps due to the violent and deceitful manner with which he took the crown, Richard III administered justice with great impartiality and by an unwearied attention to the interest of his subjects. However, Elizabeth, the widow of Richard's brother Edward IV, was suspicious of the role Richard might have played in the mysterious disappearance of her two young sons, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury. Determined to dethrone Richard III, she devised a cunning plan. Elizabeth arranged a marriage between her teenaged daughter Elizabeth of York to the 27-year-old Henry Tudor, who was living in exile in Brittany along the northwestern coast of France. Henry Tudor's father had been the half-brother of King Henry VI, making Henry Tudor the acknowledged heir to the House of Lancaster. In August of 1485, Henry Tudor, supported by French forces and English rebels, confronted Richard and his English army at the Battle of Bosworth Field. Richard was killed in the battle, and as Smollett recounts, a soldier retrieved the crown from the fallen king and placed it upon Henry's head, whereupon the entire army hailed him as king. Henry Tudor was officially crowned King Henry VII on October 30, 1485, and married Elizabeth of York on January 18, 1486. These events brought an end to the Wars of the Roses by uniting the houses of Lancaster and York into the new House of Tudor, which was represented by a white rose inside of a red rose. The reign of Henry VII brought economic and political stability to England. He remained in power until 1509, when his son, Henry VIII, peacefully ascended the throne and started a new era in English history known as the Protestant Reformation. This concludes the story of the Wars of the Roses. As George Washington read about these events in the books by Baker and Smollett, he not only imagined the roles his ancestors played, but he also distilled valuable truths about rebellions, insurrections, and revolutions, truths that would later serve him as a successful military and political leader. Thank you for watching. If you found the content useful or entertaining, please subscribe. See this video's description for a complete list of references. We look forward to being with you again in the next episode. I have been your host, Professor Worthington.